Hello gamers, Powered Heal here, and I mean what I say in the title of the video. It's meant to be controversial, but I really do think that people don't really understand why they like SoD Phase 1. I want to talk about that a bit today, because I think it has some implications for how things might get done in Classic Plus. Now at this point, Classic Plus is probably already set in stone in terms of what it's going to be, because I very much expected to release in October, November, probably not September, since I think BlizzCon is going to be like mid or late September, but probably I would say October is the target date. Or I think November could also be a target date because that's just when the original journey started, right? I could see them releasing it on the same date, like the 20th of November or something like that, or I could see them doing it a little bit earlier the same month. But regardless, I think that a lot of this stuff's going to be set in stone, but it's still worth talking about because we can still make predictions. We can still have fun just speculating, right? And my speculation currently is that they're not going to change the XP value. It's going to be 1x on Classic Plus servers, and I personally think that that's a mistake. I think that the way they are going to, and I've said this in previous videos, but I think the way that they are going to justify that is that they want there to be a very long initial exploration period. They want people to take a long time to get to 60. I don't think they're going to make it extra difficult. But I'll probably make a separate video about another aspect of why I think this is bad in terms of pacing. But I think that they just, they want to give people a bunch of time, which I'm fine with overall. But I just don't like the idea of it taking a long time on each individual character. But yeah, they just want to buy time for them to develop more content, right? So I think that they're trying to get this out the door, and they realize they can do that because they probably have a bunch of the leveling stuff done, and they can, just sit and wait and then drop content, because they know that the majority of the players, it's going to take them a little bit to get to 60. I think a lot of people are kind of looking forward to this, right? They don't want to feel rushed, and that's understandable. But honestly, I think that a big reason why so many people loved SoD was because of the accessibility that level 25 provided, right? It wasn't so much about being level 25. Like everybody seems to think that in SoD, the reason why they had so much fun was because you had to do all this cool stuff while leveling. But it wasn't really while leveling, right? Because all of you guys still rushed to level 25, and 25 was the cap, so 25 was the de facto endgame. So how can you say that something like Black Fathom Deeps, or whatever it was truly a leveling raid? The Nomergon raid was truly a leveling raid. That was the pinnacle raid available at whatever phase of the game it was at the time. So everybody still rushed max level. Everybody still wanted the good gear, the epics, the blue gear, whatever, right? So what changed then? How's the mentality changed? Like, why do people like that more? Well, I think that the main thing is just that it was easier to get there, right? So your average player who normally they would be slogging away on WoW Classic, era, and they'd be level 40 or something like that, maybe like a month in or something, or a month and a half in, people have already been raiding. They're super behind in every possible aspect because they don't have that much time to play the game. Those people actually had time to play the game in a SoD server early on, right? And then this sort of continued a little bit with every release that they did, right? Because even though it takes more XP to level up as you go, having a baseline is always helpful. So the idea is, if you have to go from 40 to 50, but you start at 40, you don't start at level 1, that is helpful in terms of, people's time played, right? The time gating does help with that. But it's really just the fact that you could kind of get to the max from wherever you were previously. In the first phase, it was 0, right? But it was very easy to get to 25, or level 1, rather. But it was very easy to get to 25. You could just get there quickly. And that allowed people to make alts, right? So there were a lot more raids going. And, like things that you would normally maybe do one time, like certain quest chains and stuff like that, people would do them multiple times, so the world was always full because people were just constantly making new characters, trying new things, and experimenting with new runes, all of that stuff. So I think that really is the heart of why so many people enjoyed SOD. It really has nothing to do with the fact that it was like a leveling raid or anything like that, right? It was to the true end game at the time, and it was just way easier to access. And I have this fear with Classic Plus that, as I think they're going to do a lot of cool things in the leveling process. But I think if the process is not made a bit more concise, then they're going to run into some issues, like serious issues, because there's just not a ton of people that can really afford the time to get to level 60 in a game like Classic. Like I'll be honest, see, I love playing this game, games in general, but I really do love World of Warcraft and Classic WoW in particular. So this is like a primary source of fun for me when I'm on the game, right? It's not like a second order or third order thing that I like to do. Like, I prefer playing this than going to the movies or going out to eat or something like that, right? That's just how I am. It's kind of how I'm wired. So, but even somebody like me who loves playing the game, it takes me, well, I mean, it takes everybody. I don't think I'm like particularly slow. If anything, I think I'm on the faster end, right? But and that makes it even worse, right? Like, it should take me less time, essentially, to get 60 than other people, and it does, but it still takes a long time, and I can still feel it. Like, when my level 47 died on this hardcore server that we're trying to get some flight paths now, we're actually doing this live. This isn't a pre-recorded VOD, because I didn't have any recorded footage from the new character. But yeah, when I actually died at level 47, it was kind of like, it was depressing, not in a serious way, right? It's just kind of like a video game at the end of the day, but it was like, damn, that really sucks, because I'm not looking forward to doing all of this again, right? It was fun starting fresh, I think in the 40s, you kind of get to that point where the novelty really wears off, and that's what I want to talk about in the next video, about pacing, and how I think the pacing of this game is not so great and can be improved. But, luckily, once you kind of get to the end of the 40s, you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because that's when you can kind of start to do the dungeons and stuff like that. You can kind of get stuff that matters in endgame. But before that, it really is sort of a slog, and I think a lot of people are still going to get caught up in that wave. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not dooming about the game. I think there's going to be a lot of people playing the game. It's going to be a huge success. It's going to be an incredible release, right? 2019 was, right? And a bunch of people got to 60 in 2019. If you can get to 60 in 2019, surely you'll probably be able to get to 60 in this upcoming Classic Plus, because it's probably going to be easier in one way or another. Like, they want the journey to be long, but they, I don't think that they want to extend it much past what a normal Classic era journey is, and most likely you're going to get new tools that make things easier, right? I expect there to be a little bit of power creep at least. So I don't know if there's probably not going to be as much power creep as SOD. I think in SOD there was almost like an emergency situation where there was so much power creep being implemented by the runes, and that's why they had to go in with the scaling on mobs, which I think is actually kind of never good. It's never a good sign when that comes out. So I don't expect that to be happening in Classic, but I do think we're going to get a little bit of power creep, and that's going to make the game easier overall. So you'll probably level faster in the new game. Also, I expect things to kind of be a bit more streamlined. I think it's going to be a bit more retail-esque, where there's tons of quests everywhere. So especially for the people that want to level via questing, it's not really going to be a thing where you kind of need these add-ons like Rested XP. They probably will exist to a degree, although even that is sort of interesting, because, I hopefully we don't get a beta for this. I actually don't think we are going to get a beta. And I think that's going to be really amazing if we don't, because they want to protect a bunch of these secrets and this cool stuff. They don't want you to go in the beta and experience all this stuff. Now, there's probably some version of beta going on, whether it be internal or family and friends or something like that, but I don't think we're going to get a public or even a closed beta, by any stretch. So they're not really going to have an opportunity to build out these add-ons, but I don't think it's going to matter because I think what's going to happen is it's kind of going to be like retail where you go into a zone and there's just so many quests available. There's not a ton of prerequisites. There'll be prerequisite quests as well because I think that people do like those to a degree, but those are going to be saved, I think, for more meaningful quest chains and stuff like that, you know? It's not going to be a thing where, like, every quest, you know, you have to go and kill 5 spiders and then come back and then kill 10 bears or something, right? It's going to be, you get the spider and the bear quest simultaneously, most likely, is how I think that's going to go on. So you're going to just walk into a zone, you're going to have a bunch of quest markers, you just pick them up and you just, you know, you go have fun. I think that's what it's going to be, and that's going to make leveling a lot smoother for many people, because another aspect of WoW leveling that kind of bogs people down that, you know, maybe isn't quite as bad anymore with the rest of XP, but it's just the fact that, you know, it can be very easy to kind of get lost in terms of how to progress your character about midway through. There's a lot of different ways you can go, and there's some areas that are pretty sparse quest-wise, right? So I think that should help with that. But again, you have to keep in mind that most people nowadays do use Rested XP, right? And Rested XP, if you are using it, I mean, it is relatively simple to follow, right? There's an arrow on screen. It works really well, like 99% of the time. It doesn't really mess up very often. It's easy to reload if something does go wrong for the most part. So, you know, even with this add-on, there's a bunch of people that don't quite make it to 60. And I'm not talking about in hardcore. I'm talking about even on the normal server. So I really do think that just the time that people have, especially this demographic in particular that has kids, that's kind of like, you know, aging out of being able to spend as much time on the game as I do and stuff like that. It's going to be a tough sell to get all of these people to level 60. And there were some people in particular that I really wanted to play with for Classic 2019. I thought it was going to be like super fun, you know, being able to kind of re-experience Classic with some of these people, and they just didn't have the time to commit to doing it again. You know, they just really didn't. They were at a point in their life where they knew what it took to get to 60 in the game, and they knew like how behind they would be. And I think, you know, people aren't going to be anywhere near as behind in this version, which is kind of a good thing, because I think the game is likely going to be structured in a way where probably the raids won't come out for a while, or even if the first raid does come out relatively shortly to tide over the hardcore players, I think that people are going to be sitting on that raid for quite a while. Like, we're not going to get the Phase 2 raid content for quite a bit if we get the Phase 1 raid content, you know, relatively quickly. So I think that will help a little bit, but I really don't think that that's why most of those people, you know, don't want to play. To be honest, I think that really it's just that the idea of having to log on to a game for, like, you know, let's say they have 2-3 hours a night to play for like weeks and weeks and really months on end to finally hit level 60. And then that's for some of these people that is what they want to do, right? Because you have to keep in mind that I think most people are not really the people who are like, oh, I just love the leveling, you know? Like, that's the game for me. It's like they're basically playing a single-player game. Most people, of course, there is that MMO aspect still while you're leveling, right? But they want, like, the end game, like, we're joining together to kill the hardest boss in the game type of feeling, you know? And if they have to go 2 or 3 months straight of putting in effort where it feels like they're not really getting many rewards because nothing that they're getting can really be used at max level, then I think a lot of those people are just going to get disinterested. I think that's what happens normally. That's why you have all these people that start, whether it be a Blizzard Fresh server or you have other Fresh servers where, you know, server releases like thousands and thousands of players, and all of a sudden it just shrinks down like precipitously, right? I think that if you had a leveling system that was a bit less brutal, a bit less grindy, right? If you maybe only had to get to the equivalent of level 50 or level 40 or somewhere in between there, like a little bit of a compromise, then lots more people would actually be retained, right? Because they would actually, a lot of people when they hit 40 in this game, like I was kind of just saying, it almost feels like a sense of doom comes over them as opposed to Enlightenment, right? Because there's kind of like less to do. It's hard to level at that point. It takes a long time to do each level, and they just really lose motivation, right? It's just like the juice doesn't seem worth the squeeze for them. And I can totally appreciate and kind of get that feeling. And I made this video before, but I always talk about classic WoW leveling as kind of like a peaks and valleys type of situation where you're just going to go through some points in this game where it feels like you're never going to get there, right? And you don't really feel like playing maybe one night, but you just kind of like push through a little bit, and then the next day something cool happens, or maybe you get like a really good day where you had a super efficient run through a zone, and then you get your dungeon done, and then you get the quest done on top of that, and you gain a couple levels, and it feels like you're gaining momentum again. So it's like a very peaks and valley type thing, but a lot of people just don't really want to put up with valleys when they're playing a video game, and especially in the sense of the people they feel like they're having to go through those valleys to just get to the end game of the game they actually want to play, because they're already going to have friction in the end game, right? They're maybe not going to be able to afford all the consumes they want super easily, right? They're not going to be able to one-shot all the bosses in the raid, most likely, right? There's going to be wipes and nights where things don't go that well. So the friction is already going to exist at the max level. So the friction existing before they even get to the max level, before they even get to doing the thing they want to do, I think that's where it becomes kind of like an insurmountable thing for a lot of people, and they're just like, I don't want any part of this, like I'm out, I'm quitting. So yeah, I think that SOD, it was like really the sweet spot. It really was, because maybe not the sweet spot. I think SOD, like I wouldn't want the leveling process for Classic Plus to get to like the new level 60 or whatever level it's going to be as fast as 1 to 25. I think that is a little bit, even for people who loved it, I think that maybe that is a bit too fast, right? But I could see something like 1 to 40. I could see something like 1 to 45, 1 to 50 even, kind of cut out that last bit. And keep in mind, if it's like the amount of time it takes to go from 1 to like 50 right now, then think about if you were to have to level like 1 to 50 in this game instead of 1 to 60, right? And then you hit that level 40, which is where the game starts to kind of really, feel like a bit of a drag and a grind, right? But, you only have 10 more levels. And now you can start doing dungeons that have relevant gear because you're closer to the end game, right? Because you're only 10 levels away. And suddenly, like, that feeling lifts. I think that's a big reason why the final 10 levels don't really feel so bad. That you can really see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's going to be the same with whatever level range you kind of scrunch things down to. So, yeah, I hope that we're getting slightly quicker leveling at least. Like I said, obviously, I think the leveling is going to be quicker just by nature of them likely adding things to the game. But hopefully the pace has increased a little bit. Because if not, I think it's still going to be huge. Like I said, 2019 was still huge. But a lot of those people, I know it's crazy to think about, right? Because so many people did play 2019 and SOD and stuff like that. And so many people were raiding and did get to max level. And it feels like a giant success. And it was in a lot of ways, right? But still, there's actually so many people that didn't, right? That actually didn't get there. And there's friends that, broke off from their friend group and stopped playing because it was just too much for them. And, they weren't really having any fun because the fun for them is the end game. That is the reality for a lot of players still. And they had to do this like super long con, to get to the payoff, and it was just too long ultimately. So I think if they really did just shorten things up a little bit, like I said, even making it the time frame of going 1 to 50 instead of 1 to 60, man, I think that would have such a and they advertise that, right? That would have such an impact on bringing new players into the game. It would get some of those players that maybe are on the fence that think, Classic is no longer for me. It just takes too long. I don't have the time in my life. Maybe it would bring some of those players back in. And, normally I'm not like a person who is the person who thinks you always need to cater to everybody, right? Like, I totally get the idea of that not always being a great solution. As a matter of fact, there was kind of I remember I was at a BlizzCon one time when they announced Hearthstone, and I was really excited that they announced Hearthstone, because I loved like Magic the Gathering and stuff like that, right? And so I was happy they're announcing the card game, but I think the lead developer at the time, he was on stage and he was talking about what prompted this, and he was a Magic fan too, and he's like, yeah, the reason why I made Hearthstone is because like I just I thought Magic was like the coolest thing, and I just think everybody should be playing this game, and I just kind of like laughed in my head, right? And I'm like, okay, that's a little bit scary to hear him say that, because and this isn't even from a perspective of gatekeeping or anything like that, but it's just like, not everybody probably does want to play Magic, right? So it was a little bit concerning to kind of hear something like that. And in some ways, I definitely think that, if you're designing a game for everyone, you're kind of designing a game for no one. And that was the concern I had there with Hearthstone at the time. But I think in this particular situation, it's a much more mild version of that, right? Because we're not talking about changing fundamental things in a huge way, right? Like game systems or stuff like that. The game will still feel very classic. I just think taking a little bit of the edge off in terms of time spent to get to 60 would go a long way and would allow many more people to feel like they could participate in the game in a meaningful way. So again, like, I'm not saying that everybody wants just the time it takes to go from 1 to 25 to be the end game for the game, right? But I think 1 to 40, 1 to 45, if you had something like that, I think that would be a great sweet spot, maybe even like 1 to 50 time frame. And a lot more people would come back to the game. And it would probably keep players longer in a way. Like, it sounds counterintuitive, right? Because you think from a developer's perspective that, like, well, I want this to take a long time for them because it takes me a long time to develop content. And if they get through it too fast, they're going to get bored, they're going to burn out. But for a lot of those people, like I said, they're not really getting through it all that fast. And their friends who maybe did rush to max level now have more people to play with. They can make alts to play with their friends who are still playing because they didn't just quit, right? Because they were just like, screw this, it takes too long. So I think you'll actually end up with more people if you cut down the time a little bit overall. So hopefully that was a consideration. And if it's not, maybe there's still time. Maybe they decide to add like, just boost XP across the board a little bit. Because, I mean, that's more of like a simple numerical change they could do if they just want to do a small XP buff. But yeah, that's something I would really like to see. And I think that the SoD experiment really did prove that. Kind of it proves what I'm saying here. And most people just think it was for a different reason, right? And that's kind of why I mentioned that at the start of the video. Because, everybody's like, oh, it's just so cool to have all these leveling raids, but it's like, no, you guys just really enjoyed playing the end game. That was the end game at the time, and you could just get there really quickly, and that gave you a lot of cool things to do because you could experiment with other classes. The respecking was cheap, so you could you could experiment with different specs, and I think that's what a lot of these games come down to. That's what a lot of the fun is about. Like experimentation and trying new things, trying new classes, all that stuff. And I think that's where a lot of the replayability comes in and what keeps people in the game. And it's not so much about the first time through having to be the longest thing ever. I don't know that necessarily like guarantees people are gonna, play the game for longer or something like that. So that's my thoughts. I'd love to hear what you guys think. And until then, I will talk to you next time. See ya.